And it should be starting. And there we go. Got a few people coming into the room already. Sid, thank you so much for doing this. So I'm going to give a quick introduction to everyone on this webinar and the topic, some housekeeping items as well in terms of questions and so on. So the topic today is smart locks in short-term rentals, all you ever wanted to know. And we've got our special guest today, Sid Butalia from Igloo, one of the smart lock companies we work with, who is the regional marketing lead for the US. Quick little items here. So we're going to describe or we're going to break down the complex topic of smart locks in the professional short-term rental industry. So join us as we dive into this world of IoT and connectivity. It's obviously one that's a bit technical and yet really something useful for vacation rentals. We have seen more and more smart locks come into play over the past 2-3 years with the concept of a digital experience. So the goal today for what you're going to learn, we're going to understand the fundamentals of smart lock technology and the security features behind it, explore kind of different methods that guests can use to access properties that are equipped with smart locks. So whether it's, with codes or with lock unlock functionalities and so on. Looking at the user friendliness of these devices, the compatibility, as well as the hassle-free installation. This is obviously something as you scale your portfolio, the idea of getting that device, if it's difficult to install, and you're going to have to do it 200 more times. So we're going to figure out how to best assess those types of devices. Managing smart locks remotely, granting temporary access, and of course, handling guest issues. And finally, looking at a bit more on the privacy concerns and leveraging smart lock integration with other devices. So if you are a hospitality professional, a short-term rental business operator, a guest service lead, and you're eager to learn a bit more about these devices, whether you already have smart devices in your units or you're looking into it, this is the webinar for you. Without further ado, just one last thing on the housekeeping thing. So there's a chat bubble on the right-hand side where you can ask questions. There's also a question button, so that might be actually easier. We are going to address your questions towards the end of the webinar, but feel free to ask them as the conversation goes. And you also have the cool emoji button if you hear something you like or something you don't like. Without further ado, we're going to do a little introduction. Sid, welcome, and tell us more about yourself.
Thank you, Francois. My name is Sid. I am the regional marketing lead for the US and North America for Igloo. Previously, I was a head of product at Igloo, so really managing all our hardware products and solutions. So from our padlocks to our key boxes and even door locks. So my background, I'm an industrial designer, mechanical engineer myself. So I do understand how these things work from inside out, as well as how the user experience is. So yeah, with that, open to any questions, and I'll be as honest and frank as I can be with some of my answers.
Love it. And a quick item to it, award-winning product expert. With over 15 years.
Thanks to Igloo. I think always need a good company to back it. Yeah.
Love it. So let's get started with a really basic question. What are smart locks and how do they work?
Sure. So smart locks are essentially, they're a mechanical product that opens and closes a door. They're not a door handle. They're not a doorknob. They're essentially the lock. Most of them are motorized, so they are battery powered. And in the past, they were digital, where they would not have smartphone features. But now, as we see, we're starting to see more smartphone connectivity with door locks. And as a result, a huge range of software features that come along with it. I think we'll get into those later in the call, but essentially, just like a smart anything, you're taking a traditional mechanical device and you're adding some intelligence to it.
100%. 6 years ago, I remember working with a device just for fun for my home. It was called a Sesame lock, and it didn't have any real connectivity to it. I don't think the company went anywhere, unfortunately. But now we're seeing more and more brands come out. There's more and more types of devices, and there's different types of connectivity as well with those devices. So maybe you can tell us a bit more about the different types of smart locks. There's keypads, there's biometric. Yeah, right, what's up with all that?
So we can break it down first. I think connectivity is a big topic, because when we started out, there was no connectivity. We then looked at, with the proliferation of smartphones having Bluetooth connectivity, And then it kind of expanded to Wi-Fi and then Z-Wave and Zigbee in some cases. Now, we even have at Igloo, we have cellular connected locks that are connected directly to cell phone towers. So, that connectivity range is always evolving. And I think for any brand to maintain a solid market share, they need to be able to have a few options there. As far as access is concerned, we've seen, let's say, biometric and PIN code access quite a while back with commercial access control. But with any product, it always starts out with a B2B where the need is much more. People are willing to pay for it. And we see it trickle down into consumer. So today, when you look at the smart lock world, you have facial recognition, you have biometric, you have PIN codes. I think at CES, there was an example of palm scanning, voice. So really anything you can verify with a software, you can now do on a lock itself. So when you couple this with a smartphone, then you get that next order of security. You can do multi-factor, you can do, two-factor authentication. So that it's really, I think we're at a very interesting stage where, yes, there are a lot of smart lock makers, but I feel like we've only touched the surface yet.
Yeah. There's different ways of actually unlocking that door. Right. That makes sense. And there's different types of devices as well, right? And this is something Igloo touches quite a bit, where you've got the ones, as you mentioned, with keypads. So you're going to put in a number to access the unit. Some don't have the keypad. So I'm assuming it's more of you need a lock unlock functionality or some other way of opening the door. I have yet to see the hand palm. That'd be awesome to walk into an Airbnb like that. And what are the most popular sort of smart locks and features in the short-term rental properties? What do you see as the trend?
So the short-term rental scenario is primarily where you have one primary user, one or two, maybe an administrator, a manager, property manager, but your end users, you could have thousands, right? Yeah. So in that scenario, PIN codes by far are the most powerful form of access because they can easily be shared. And also, thanks to our AlgoPIN technology, they can be generated completely offline. Right. So when it comes to having a very reliable system that has virtually no downtime, that's where PIN codes really come in. If you're talking about biometrics, let's say fingerprint, for example, due to security concern, you can't store users' fingerprint data on the cloud. Mm-hmm. So you have to store it on the lock. What that means is for a typical short-term rental customer, they're only going to be at the lock when they check in. So that kind of defeats the purpose because then you have to be there to do the onboarding of their fingerprint. So that's where we see PIN codes being the primary use case. Second to that, we're starting to see Bluetooth pick up, where a lot of our integration partners are figuring out ways to create, temporary guest experience applications. Yeah. And through that, giving your guests the ability to just unlock it from the smartphone is a little easier because you don't have to remember a PIN code.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have to pair the device when you do that, or is it strictly because of the offline functionality you don't have to? Tell us more about that.
For the PIN codes, not at all. I think the only pairing is through the property manager or the administrator. Everything else is just you can text it, you can email it. Exactly. I think that's the power of PIN codes. Also, I would say most countries follow the same numerical system, so it's easy for guests from all over the world to understand.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. I would recommend PIN codes in general. It's a good fail-safe when you have that lock-unlock functionality. If there's any sort of delay or connectivity issue or anything in that nature, then having the code is just always going to work, basically, especially with that offline functionality that you mentioned. Can you share a bit more, maybe, I know I'm going off script here, but about that offline functionality? Because that's something that's quite unique to Igloo. How does that work?
So I'm going to talk about it in two ways. One, just the technology, and secondly, why we did it in this way for short-term rentals. So the first thing, the technology, if you could imagine when you pair the lock, you've created a virtual lock in the cloud, right? On your servers, right? Whatever PIN codes you want to generate, you can generate on your server, and your physical lock and your virtual lock are synced. They're synced down to the millisecond. So essentially you've created a one-way traffic where whatever you do on the cloud can be applied to the lock through the PIN code. So that's kind of how it works. You can't delete a PIN code, but you can generate a PIN code. It's one-way traffic. Now, why did we do it? Why did we do it like this for short-term rentals? Well, almost every short-term rental partner of us has a software to manage bookings. Now, in order to make sure that that integration was as easy as possible, all we need to do is expose web APIs. So whatever software you're managing, whatever integration you're working on, you don't ever have to talk to the lock, the physical device. You're only talking to our cloud system. And I think that's where the Algo PIN really comes in powerful for short-term rentals.
100%. So, I mean, already just in the first 10 minutes of this webinar, if there's some key learnings I think people can get from is connectivity type. I think that's a huge list. We mentioned briefly Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Zigbee, Z-Wave, sorry. And I think, Sid, we can both agree that Wi-Fi is kind of like the go-to trend moving forward, right? For smart devices.
So yes, I mean, especially if you have Wi-Fi on site in your rental, the connectivity range is pretty decent. And with that, you can automatically get additional features. First being notifications. When someone opens it or closes it, you get a notification. Second one, you can actually create customized PIN codes. So whether they're 4 digits, 5 digits, you can simplify it, right? And the final thing that we find quite useful is for canceled bookings, you can delete a PIN code if the lock is connected to Wi-Fi. Yeah.
That makes sense. And so part of the reason why there were these different types of connectivity, just for people to know, is you had mentioned it earlier, Sid, is Wi-Fi wasn't great 5-10 years ago, but Wi-Fi is great now. So Wi-Fi is kind of the move. We work with a company where the founder actually sits on our board called Smart Things, and they were a hub that connected all these different types of connectivity. And it's funny, I kind of see the need for that hub disappearing slowly.
Right.
As people start centralizing a bit more the types of connectivity on devices, you don't need these different frequencies or so on to connect devices together. So it's great to see Igloo push as well for that. And of course, the Bluetooth for closer range and so on, which adds to the stability.
I would like to add one thing, Francois. I think the core, we still use Bluetooth primarily because of its power efficiency. While Wi-Fi is still getting better, it's still a lot more power hungry than Bluetooth. And I think we're starting to see, networks like Matter coming in, which are kind of trying to do both, having the connectivity of Wi-Fi, but with a lower power, drain closer to that of Bluetooth. So it's interesting now because Wi-Fi is not ideal for smart devices because of its power consumption. But because of that, we're starting to see new technologies coming out.
It's interesting because once you start digging into smart devices and these kinds of nuances is when you start understanding, well, why can't it just work all the time and not need to be connected and so on, as you start realizing, well, Bluetooth versus Wi-Fi, the energy consumption, so having to change batteries more frequently in those cases versus others. So I think it ultimately comes down as well as a property manager to what do you have a massive amount of volume, and this lock is going to be more helpful for you, where you don't need to change the battery all the time. Right. Are you close to the units and you just want convenience for the guest, and so it's okay if you have to change the battery? Right. Finding out what is going to scale for your business is ultimately what makes these devices unique. And you guys have a wide range too of types of devices, which I think is really cool. Can you share as well a bit more, again, off script here, the difference between North America and Europe when it comes to devices?
Okay, so I think the first thing is just the hardware, the door hardware, the way the door is built. So in North America, it's very standardized. I think most, even Canada, tends to adopt like the ANSI standards of North America. And 99% of the time, unless you're in a condominium, it's going to be a deadbolt, right? For most homes and things. So that actually is one of the easiest types of, locks to install. And I would say deadbolt is your North America product. Now for Europe, it's a little interesting because every country has a slightly different, standard as well as, fire rating. So one of the approaches that we have and many other lock makers have is not actually touching what's on the door. So coming up with solutions that either retrofit onto the door itself on the inside, or providing our like a key box, for example, that's on the outside of the door. So in a sense, you don't void any legal issues with fire rating of the door because you're not tampering with it.
Right.
You also don't need to change your physical key system. Let's say you have a security guard or something that has to have a copy of a key. With a retrofit solution or a key box solution, they don't really need to change their workflow, right? So I think that's what we see in Europe. It's a little less standardized, and as a result, we tend to use like what I like to call a hybrid system, where it's either retrofit onto the lock or it's a key box with a pin code or something like that.
That makes sense.
Canada has some quirks, but by and large, deadbolts work quite well. We do also produce mortises. So mortises is kind of what you would see in a hotel room, where your entire lock and handle is one big piece. So it's a little more involving to install, but it's a little more robust at the end of the day.
And by robust, what do you mean? The strength of the lock, or
just mechanical robustness, alignment. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with your door getting jammed. In North America, sometimes you got to really, turn the key. So what happens is when you have a deadbolt, you've got your latch or your doorknob, right? And then you have your lock. Those two tend to shift over time, right? Even your door frame. So the alignment between those two is fixed in a mortise because it's the same
one
metal piece. Yeah, one
right.
piece.
Right. And so when you're choosing a lock, we've talked about connectivity. Now we're talking about the sort of types. Obviously, if you're in Europe, you're kind of stuck with whatever you have to work with. How would you choose between that mortise lock or just simple deadbolt, et cetera?
Right.
Is that something that one should consider? How does that decision-making process go through? Yeah.
Right. So I think the first thing, you just need to look at your door and you need to see what's already on it, right? I would always recommend using what you have before you start drilling holes in your door. So if there is a solution to retrofit, we could go with that, right? Now, even if you decide to remove your hardware and replace it with smart hardware, it's better to replace like for like. So if you have a deadbolt, it's better to replace it with a smart deadbolt rather than swapping it out with a mortise. Now, if you have a new door, right, that has no lock on it and you're getting it prepped, it's a bit open to interpretation what you want to do with that door. So I would still say the deadbolt is a bit easier to prep, but the mortise, once you've prepped it, is a very elegant solution because it's all contained in one piece. So I think that's how I would recommend anybody approach it, where think of it like you're still replacing a lock. It still has to hold a door shut. So just because it's smart, you still have to think of it as a mechanical product. And then comes in the question of, do you want Wi-Fi? Is it okay with Bluetooth? Are you just going to be using PIN codes, or are you going to be connecting this with a smart home, for example?
That makes sense. And in terms of mortise, to clarify as well, is it going to automatically lock at the end of not at the end of the stay, but once you've closed the door? So you've unlocked the door, you open it, and you push it back in, and it automatically locks, right? Is that the case for mortise specifically, and then not for deadbolts? Is that a product of the software? How does that exactly work?
Sure. So all our locks have a auto lock feature. So this is, again, for reminders, forgetfulness, and things. We every time you close it, there's a sensor that detects it that automatically locks it. So I think what you might be referring to is a dead latch. So a dead latch is what you see in hotels.
Yes.
When you close it, it just latches. So if you forget your key card, you're locked out. So this feature, our auto lock, can actually be turned on or off in our app.
Okay. That makes sense.
So I think that's the nice thing about it.
Yeah, because I know that there are certain regulations. I noticed this with Canada with one of our clients, where if they've registered more as a hotel group, then they need to have this for fire safety reasons versus a vacation rental where you don't necessarily need to. And the other aspect I think that's really nice is guests tend to not really go through any of your checkout instructions. and can be
Correct.
forgetful and just leave the door unlocked. That could lead to some theft or any other issues post stay. Now you always have that control for people who are listening in to remotely lock or unlock those devices yourself as well manually, which is a neat functionality I find with Igloo and other devices. So we've kind of talked about connectivity, the process of picking a lock based on location, as well as the type of door effectively that you're working with. What are some of the biggest benefits that you're seeing from clients moving to this smart device world? When I first started in the vacation rental industry about 5 years ago, smart devices were kind of a niche thing. They were a nice to have. And I think the benefits weren't very clear. A lot of people talk about security, not really sure if it is actually secure to use a smart lock versus a traditional key. And I think what we saw with COVID was that sort of digital trend where people don't want to meet you face to face to get the key and coordinate times as to when they can check in. They want that sort of ease of access. What other benefits are you seeing on implementing smart devices?
So I would say three big ones. And I think these are umbrellas that affect both the property manager and the guest as well. First one is convenience. I think for the guest, not having to worry about an access card or a separate key, I think already is one less thing for them to carry. I don't know about you guys, but whenever I travel, I feel like I'm always worried about where's my wallet, where's my phone, it's just one less thing to worry about, right?
Sure.
The second thing is security, not so much from the actual lock hardware itself, but from the fact that at any point you can pull logs from that device. So if there's any investigation, if somebody's lost something or left something in the room, you now have a very down to the second accurate log of what happened on that door, right? I don't know if this is common in North America, but I've seen, security cameras as well being used for these short-term rentals. So when you have these two bits of information, I think you essentially have a monitoring system on your front door. So security is the second thing. At times it can act as a deterrent if people are thinking of doing something, committing a crime. Being able to see a security camera and a smart lock helps deter that. But finally, I would say, and this is really for the property manager, operational efficiency.
Yeah.
In the past, maybe a single manager might be able to turn over 2 or 3 units in a day if they're spread out, right? And vacation rentals can tend to be a bit remote, right? So being able to now, a single user, manage, 10, 15, 20 handovers in a single day is something that could never even be thought about a decade ago.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny because I saw services a few years back that were selling, for $20 to $30 to $40 per check-in to go and check your guest in for you, which is basically just showing up and giving a key. I think also from a cost perspective, when people are thinking, well, do I really want to spend $200, $300, $400, $500 on a smart lock, depending on the type? The cost of replacing the key and the cost of replacing the entire lock system if a guest steals or accidentally forgets to bring back the key is monstrous, right? And that's going to end up costing you more than the initial investment in that device in the first place. Which there's different ways of, I think, justifying the benefits from both a cost perspective and a convenience perspective. And then, security, it's funny because I think 5-6 years ago, people kept saying, well, what happens if someone hacks into the system? And I would always say, well, what happens if you lost your key, right? Or what happens if someone steals your key? It's the same principle. Ultimately, it's just making you have less control. But what does that security look like for Igloo? And I'm sure you guys are super serious.
Yeah. So we're using kind of what the world is in terms of Bluetooth encryption, Wi-Fi encryption. Nothing different from what we're seeing on other smart lock and smart home products. I think when you talk about that security, unless you're getting into like data centers, there's really not much difference. 128-bit, 256-bit, it just progressively increases. But I'll tell you an interesting story. We were talking to like a locksmith, asking them about how secure your lock needs to be, and their repeated answer is breaking a window is much easier than picking a lock. So if somebody really wants to get into your home, chances are your front door is not the thing that's going to be broken into. So what we're seeing is smart locks, they provide security more in terms of monitoring, but even in terms of traditional locks, it's really about locking down the other things to your home as well. So you could put a huge chunky lock on your front door, but that's going to deter someone from breaking into the door. There could be other ways to enter the home. Yeah.
That's true. That's very true.
And for most single family homes, there are multiple entry points.
Yeah. Not just multiple windows, multiple doors too.
Doors that can be kicked in, a back door, a side door. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think overall figuring out the right secure lock is also something of concern, I think, for when property managers are choosing which providers to work with, compatibility and so on. So maybe let's go through kind of the list of how to pick the right smart lock. We get this question quite a bit on Enzo Connect. A lot of people will send us a message being like, hey, I'm getting started. Which device should we use? And we also have people who will switch a lot between device providers because something might not work exactly the way they want, whether it's battery status or connectivity and so on. So I'm a property manager. How do I make that choice? Which steps do I go through?
So I would really recommend starting out with a key box. And the reason is you can kind of optimize how the software fits into your management workflow without investing in even a locksmith to come change anything out. So we can just have a key box. You can mount it onto something outside your door. And it's a nice kind of like IoT 1.5 where you have some of the functionality, but there's still a bit of manual, behaviors. The advantage of this is that you don't have to change all the locks. You can just put a key box in, even if you have multiple doors, front door, side door, back door, you can provide those keys in the key box. So essentially you're providing access to the whole home with a single device, right?
Yeah.
So that's one way I would suggest. Once you're a bit comfortable with how it all works, then you identify which is the door that most people are using. And then that's the door you look at putting a smart lock on. What that does is it just saves that issue where someone may not put the key back inside the key box, right? Yeah. And then the door will automatically lock as well. So I think that's where I would suggest doing the first smart lock. Once you identify which is the door that most of your guests will end up using, then you can start to think the value adds. Does it make sense to have a smart lock on the back door? Let's say you have a swimming pool or something, and at night you want to make sure that back door is closed. I think a smart lock is a good addition there on secondary doors as well. So that's how I would go through deciding which smart lock to do. And then when it comes to the door, then, on our website, we have a compatibility checklist. So, we'll ask you a few questions about your door, and we can suggest which lock will be compatible with that door.
Which models, yeah. That makes sense. And, if you're willing to alter the door, I'm assuming that's going to be part of the topic of changing, et cetera. I'm assuming most property managers don't necessarily want to go that in depth with changing the doors because they're managing other people's properties. So it's a fairly big investment to go in and change that. But again, having those different options, I think is what ends up working best. What about warranties and anything like that? Obviously that might be specific to you guys at Igloo, but in general, should that be part of the decision process?
Yeah.
Is that
I think so, because fundamentally, this purchase is a operational, purchase. So downtime is never desired. So I think in the US, we offer a minimum 1-year warranty, which we can extend. In Europe, I believe we offer a 2-year warranty.
Amazing.
And that covers our hardware. So if anything's, there's an issue with it, with the original receipts and, obviously we need the Bluetooth, the serial numbers, we can get a replacement, no issues.
100%. And one of the things that I like personally about Igloo, just for everyone who's watching in, is the ability to program those codes when and how. I think this is something that's key that you have to think about is when are you going to be able to program those codes? When are they going to be made available to your guests and be actually accessible? So just a little, heads up to people that are out there. With Enzo, the way we program your codes is we'll program them actually immediately at booking confirmation, but we'll only make them available 2 hours before the guests stay.
Right.
We will then gate those check-in codes with your step-by-step check-in instructions and so on. And so the combination of those three factors from a security perspective, but also from a connectivity, things can happen with smart devices where code didn't get set. And I think one of the advantages with Igloo is that algo pin where we can kind of rest assured that it is actually set and it is actually working all the time. So some things to consider. And again, I would highly recommend PIN codes over the just lock unlock. We see hotels move more to the no pin codes, but I think it's just the limitation of the types of devices that they work with. I fully agree that on the vacation rental side, having smart codes is almost a must to avoid any issues and guests not being able to check in and so on. Really awesome. So we've gone through different steps. We've assessed the different types of smart locks that are out there. And in terms of, I guess, overcoming some challenges and some of the risk mitigations behind it, what are some common concerns with smart devices, and how can operators troubleshoot them or get ahead of those types of issues? Because obviously nothing is perfect. There's always going to be an issue here and there, and that can cause a bit of stress for the operations person or the boots on the ground. So what are some of those challenges, and how do we prevent them?
Sure. So I'm going to start with like the one that people encounter the most, which is a door that's slightly misaligned, and gets jammed. This is just a function of doors. I think, they're wood, they're metal. Over time, especially in North America with heating, cooling, winter, summer cycles, your door and your frame will slightly get misaligned. So if anybody's had experience even with, traditional mechanical locks, your key will get stuck over time. So same thing applies with a smart lock. So we just need to be aware, and this could be an annual thing or, every 6 months, depending on where you live, where either you or the locksmith just needs to come in and check that your door is functioning okay. This applies to mechanical locks as well, but with a smart lock, because it's battery powered, it drains your battery a lot faster. Okay. So one of the things is maintaining good kind of door alignment to make sure that your lock is operating at optimal efficiency. I think it's a very good analogy could be something as maintaining your engine in your car. Over time, if you let that engine deteriorate, your efficiency is going to go down. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, in the event of any battery drain, we do have emergency jumpstart power on all our locks. So what that means is there's still a way to get in for you, the guest, the property manager, as long as we've got like a 9-volt battery on some of them. And on our newer locks, we're actually doing it via USB Type-C. So very similar to your power banks or your phones. Okay. So you can actually connect like an Android phone or a tablet to our lock, and it can power up the lock for emergency power. So that's one of the things that fit into, how do I call it, reliability, right? Yeah. So similarly, your Wi-Fi or your power could cut out for your home. And that's where AlgoPin comes in, where we don't need those things to allow people to go in and out of the home. Yeah. So I think these are kind of those three main things I would look out for. Some things that are a little more regional. Europe, for example, you should be a bit aware of what you can do to your door in terms of insurance, right? Some places don't allow you to touch your door, right? And some places do. So you just have to be wary, knowledgeable on that factor before you start spending money and swapping things out. Yeah. The other thing that I've learned is sometimes what's outside your home is public space, right? And when it comes to mounting, let's say, a key box, you have to make sure and check with the building or wherever you are that you're allowed to mount it on the wall. If you can't mount it on the wall, our key box has a shackle. So you can just hook it onto maybe the door handle or a railing. But it's really good to make sure that you're following whatever local, rules there are. I think really the final thing is insurance. And I think insurance, there are a lot of vacation rental products, and it's just important to be knowledgeable on what coverage they provide with or without a smart lock. Makes sense. And if there are any requirements of that smart lock. It's very, and I don't have all the answers to this because it differs, but that's kind of where we see most of the, I would say, pitfalls or things to be warned about.
That makes perfect sense. And yeah, you're right. HOA, condos, et cetera, they might not let you have smart devices. I know my building doesn't. I lost my key a few weeks back. It was the most frustrating experience to go through. And I honestly wish I had a smart device, so I might just retrofit something in the background that can't be seen on the public side of the door, if you will. But it's something to consider as well, right? If you're working out of condos or, different types of real estate inventory that won't necessarily allow you to have those devices.
Especially when it comes to mounting things outside. So like on the wall, for example, we have a keypad product that you can still mount with screws. Let's say it's your own home.
Yeah.
But we also offer mounting tape because we find in a lot of places, just being able to stick it on is far, it's received a lot better than drilling into the wall.
That makes sense. And, going back to one of the things around common concerns and troubleshooting, you'd mentioned, device battery draining. And I think we had a comment about someone sharing that experience. One thing to note that you had mentioned around the misalignment, part of the reason why I'm assuming it gets drained on the battery is it's trying again and again to relock or unlock the door and physically can't. Is that correct? And that's why potentially there may be a battery drainage issue where it's just constantly trying to do the same thing over and over.
So if you imagine your bolt, right?
Yeah.
That has to move like this.
Right.
So imagine if there's a force holding it in place. Mm-hmm. That's a friction force, and the motor needs to overcome that. So that's why every time the motor's working a little harder than it needs to.
Right. And so it's going to drain that battery. That makes sense. One thing to also note to operators that are out there, I would highly, highly, highly recommend setting up notifications from your smart device dashboard, whether it's in Enzo or in any other company that you're using, to inform your staff, specifically your cleaning staff, when there might be a battery outage. I think that's a really easy win from an operations perspective, where if they're going in and cleaning the property and they can charge that lock again or replace the batteries as they're doing the cleaning, it'll just save you time and hassle. And I would set that benchmark at like 20% battery level, at least our version of 20%. I don't know what that reflects in Igloo or in other devices, but assuming it's the same sort of percentage basis on that. That makes perfect sense. And in terms of compliance and regulations, absolutely agree with making sure that you can in fact do this. Check in as well with the owners. And do you recommend, now this is more on the operations side, less smart lock related, but would you recommend passing on the cost to the owners of the property? And if so, how do you justify this investment to owners?
Sorry, Francois, I just missed that last one.
So would you pass on the cost of smart devices over to the owners in the vacation space? Not the property manager?
This one's tricky. This one's tricky because I feel like some owners might want that ownership of the lock on their door, but some owners, the ones that are a little maybe more disconnected from the operations, are probably like, no, I'm paying you. You go ahead and manage it. You just make sure everything's okay for me. I think there's two types of owners. The more involved ones, I think, could be willing because they might see value in it for themselves as well.
Yeah. So just sharing the value for the owners is something you might
I think the best thing is just being able to remotely have a view of what's happening on your property is the number one value for these smart locks.
100%. I think getting logs on who's locking and unlocking those units will also show foot traffic in a certain way. So you can know, okay, this place isn't rented out and yet the door unlocked and someone's in my unit. So that's definitely something you're going to want to consider there. Also, traceability for legal reasons. There's certain cities that have squatter rights and so on. Being able to prove that something was messed with to effectively squat is, we've seen this with Atlanta, which is unfortunate, where they do have squatter laws. And so we always have to be extra cautious on who gets in and out of those units. This makes perfect sense. I think there's a lot.
Francois, I would like to raise, one scenario of ownership that we see not so much with vacation rental, but with, build to rent, where we have companies building these new homes. They are managing the locks. They own the locks right on until the house is built and is sold or rented out. Then, like, for example, if the house is sold, through our back-end software, they can essentially transition all ownership of the device to the owner of the house. So this all happens behind the scenes. So there's no technician that needs to go there and change anything. We can do this from our platform as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's so many different benefits, and it's funny because again, 5-6 years ago when I went into this industry and I spoke to people, it wasn't the main topic of interest, right? People were looking at cleaning, operations, maintenance, and so on, and smart devices was kind of a back burning idea, and now it's at the forefront. I mean, I think a lot of operators can agree that they wouldn't want to run their vacation rental management business without the concept of a smart device for locking and unlocking those doors. We have seen people start off with the sort of residential grade fun device, like what do you call those? The camera ones. The more camera based, not actually smart devices. Ring doorbells. They'll start with ring doorbells, and it's kind of like their version of moving into IoT. Quickly realize that you can only have 10 ring doorbells managed on one account. So then they have, once they're at 50 units, they have like 5 different accounts, and it becomes messy. So thinking about scale, I think, is another factor when choosing those smart devices, is what device is going to help you scale long term. We have a mutual client that I think is beyond happy with smart devices, and will be on our French version of this webinar. David from Simplissimo, who has probably about 150 to 200 of these smart devices, specifically Igloo. So it's good to see this technology pick up quickly. Now, there are new trends. There are new innovations happening in the hardware space. Can you share a bit more about those emerging features and advancements in smart devices and smart technology?
Right. So what's interesting about it is there are some features that are catered to, B2B, vacation rental hosts and property managers, and some features that are really coming up that are catered to the end user, convenience features, right? So I'll talk a bit about both. So I'm going to start with like just the smart home. And this is more perspective of the guest experience. Matter is a new kind of ecosystem technology that's coming up, allowing, Android devices to talk to Apple devices, that talk to, Google devices, that eventually our devices as well. So we are looking at bringing new products in for this ecosystem. So what you are going to see is it's going to become a lot easier to integrate a smart lock into your smart home. And I think that's one big shift. So if you can get over the DIY of a screwdriver and all that, the IT stuff is far easier, right? So that's one big trend we're seeing. The next one, which we believe is quite powerful for short-term rentals, are biometric facial recognition as well as mobile access cards. So we're seeing, like, as you mentioned, in hotels, they like the physical tap card, but we're starting to see that transition from a physical card to a digital card. If anybody has an iPhone for the last 5 years, I think we've all become dependent on tap to pay, right? Like Apple Pay. Yeah. So cars, hotels, they're starting to bring that in. However, it's only constrained to the Apple ecosystem. And as a result, if you decide to build a piece of hardware, it'll only work with the Apple ecosystem. Now, we like to think we're a little more universal than that. So we've actually, in the process of developing a new technology, which is camera-based. What this technology will allow you to do is you can show through a smartphone or a picture an access code in the form of a QR. Now, this QR code is proprietary to us, the way we encode it. Yeah. And just like our algo PIN, you can enter the home with a QR code that works completely offline. It can be a one-time code. It can be a duration code. It can change every hour. It could change every day. And I think that's the power of a digital access over, let's say, physical access. We're trying to take that a next step as well, where we could potentially allow a guest who's staying for a week or 2 weeks to be able to program their face onto the lock, only the lock, for that duration of period, again, offline. So the idea is that, there's a lot of concerns about identity theft, especially when things are on the cloud. So we try to do everything offline on the device. So these are some new technologies that we're looking at to improve the guest experience, right? The other one, I think, is really the integration side. So it's becoming a lot easier to integrate new features through APIs on this, and we constantly push it because we really specialize in building the hardware, and connecting that hardware to all these different service providers. So that's kind of our Igloo Connect, which works a little differently from some other integration partners. So that's something we're quite proud of. But finally, I think, and this is really, I wouldn't say for short-term rentals, but for users, we want to live in a world where you don't have to think about unlocking or locking your door. So when you come home, you walk up to your door, it unlocks. You don't have to worry, is my door unlocked or is it locked? When you leave your home, you're not like, oh, I need to go check that the doors are locked.
Yeah.
It becomes second nature through automation. So we're starting to see automation come into these smart locks where it's less about a lock, it's more about an entryway. So, I'll give you an example. Even if you have an automatically unlocking door, you still need to take your hand and turn the doorknob to open the door. But in the future, imagine that doorknob is also connected to your lock where, you just need to maybe nudge the door open with your shoulder, or you just walk through it and it'll open. So we have a product in Asia, which is a mortise lock that works like this. So you walk up to it, it unlocks, it releases the lock, it releases the latch as well. So you can just push the door and it opens it. So whether your hands are full, and then you talk about like accessibility, I think that's kind of where we want to see smart locks go.
The evolution of technology in that sense, one of the first proof of concept, I don't know if it'll show with my background, but the first proof of concept was this door, which you can kind of see if I hover around. And one of the things we had done around at Enzo was connect your Uber account, your Uber Eats account, and other types of apps that people were using. And it was just to kind of play around with devices and see how the connectivity would work and so on. And I always thought, eventually we should have this system for guests in the vacation rental world, where if I know your flight and I know that you're taking an Uber and I know all these details about when and where you're going to be, then I should be able to create that seamless check-in experience that almost involves me opening the door for you, except it's technology opening the door for you. And then one other thing that you touched on, which I cannot wait to see the advancements on, is that Apple specific functionality. We released a feature, I think it was 8 months ago or a year ago, where you could add your boarding pass, our native guest web app, our guest web app to your Apple Wallet. Now, people always ask me what happens if I have an Android. I always jokingly say, go get an iPhone, but you can't really control that for guests. And I think where I see that future happening, and we see it already with Apple Pay, we see it already with different memberships and so on with the Apple Wallet functionality, is that sort of one tap to unlock where your phone is the key ultimately to access the property. Where are we at with that? Do you know? Is it because I know Apple is extremely tough with types of devices to work with and all the details behind it.
Everyone's trying to control their own piece of the pie, but from what we learned with AlgoPin, for the vacation rental market, you cannot, every constraint you put on your guest is limiting to your business, right? So even if we, like, for example, if we release our new credential, it's called Algo Pass, right? Okay. It'll be offered through Apple Wallet, but it will also be offered through Android. So regardless of which platform you use, it'll still work. And that's really important to us. I think we don't want to be a single ecosystem provider. We might have a product in the future that focuses on just one, but ultimately I think the power of it for vacation, short-term rentals is like a universal design.
Yeah. 100%. And, one thing I'll add to this before we opening it up for questions is, the importance of having this information allows you to further curate the experience for guests. And I think this is something to factor in as you're thinking of using a smart device. The fact that I can know exactly when you've checked in, when you've opened the door for the first time, means that I know when to personalize the experience. And what I mean by this is, in hotels, the first thing that people do when they walk into the room is they sit on the bed, they check the comfort of the bed, they walk around and check the cleanliness of the unit, and then they check the bathroom to see if it was clean. Well, in vacation rentals, it's a bit different because it's not a 6 square meter room. It's sometimes a house. Sometimes it's much bigger space. And so we don't really have information on the sort of first impression that a guest has. And so you can leverage this information, and this is something we can help you out with at Enzo. You can leverage this information, aka when the lock is unlocked for the first time for a guest, to send a survey and to see what that first impression is like, or to ask certain questions or welcome them and create that more personal experience. Something you may or may not be able to do with what I'm going to call a dumb lock, which is, hey, the key's under the doormat, have a good stay, where you have no idea when they've come in and so on. You can also leverage that opportunity for upsells, but that's a whole different webinar that I'll save for another time. Awesome. I think we've given the audience quite a few themes on how to pick the right smart device. Maybe we can go ahead and answer a few questions. If anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and click the Ask a Question button. We're going to be here for the next 5-10 minutes to help answer and see what kind of choices you have as you're picking these devices. I'm going to go ahead in the conversation as well. How's the connectivity with apps like Airbnb? Does it allow you to streamline your business? Are you guys directly integrated to Airbnb as part of the latest Airbnb smart device? You are? Amazing. This is something that we also have an integration with, both with Airbnb and with Igloo. I see one person had a battery issue, so maybe we answered your question about troubleshooting to see whether or not that device is misaligned, although we're looking at a key box, so maybe that's something, Sid, your team could help out with for Lewis there. Let's see what else we have. A few people haven't had any issues. That's good. What smart lock management software doesn't require minimum number of doors or minimum amount of monthly fee? So this is a question from Kevin. Unfortunately, I think at Enzo, we do have a minimum, which is a bit of a shame. But Kevin, if you shoot me a message after this chat, we can see what you're working with here, because smart devices is a separate section of our platform. So feel free to send me an email there. 2 questions. I'm going to go ahead and start live answer. So are there future plans for integrations with Verbo? Sid, you want to take that one over? If you've done Airbnb?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't actually started on it, but it's picking up. I think the number of users on Verbo have really scaled, and that's definitely something we would love to bring on board. Yeah.
100%. I mean, I think ultimately, Chris, it depends as well on like the direction of these OTAs. Airbnb, as per their latest quarterly report, is definitely making a stance around building their own ecosystem of software and tools that will allow you to manage your property at scale on Airbnb only. Right now, a property management software like a Guesty, a Hostaway, et cetera, has no benefits of getting you distributed just on Airbnb. And so they push you to be on multiple channels, and rightfully so. So Airbnb, I think, wants to kind of build an ecosystem so that you don't need to be on any other channel. So I don't know if we'll see VRBO moving in that direction just yet. I think it's going to take a bit more time. And to answer a bit more in depth, we checked out the Airbnb APIs. We're officially integrated with them versus the VRBO ones. And VRBO still does not have a non-PMS API. So it might take a bit more time before we start seeing smart devices in Verbo specifically. Food for thought. Kevin Powell. So what smart lock management software doesn't require a monthly minimum? Kevin, shoot me an email and let's chat. Let's see what we can do here to help you out. We do have a smart device dashboard that allows you to see battery status, programming access codes, and all of the jazz you need to manage your smart devices. So this was Kevin's question right here. Do we have any other questions around?
I saw one from Chris in the chat, which was about the algo pin codes, being able to customize it somehow.
Okay.
Chris, it's a bit tricky to actually customize the algo pin numbers. However, I think as Francois mentioned, with a bridge, and I know Enso is integrated with our bridge over Wi-Fi, you're able to customize that code to whatever numbers you want. I think at a minimum of 4 digits. Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. Yeah,
yeah.
On our end, unfortunately, I don't think we allow them to customize the codes because people will make a mistake. They'll add a letter by accident and then wonder why the code's not working, or they'll change the number to something else and type something wrong. So you can do it for temporary and permanent codes that you program for your staff or for other people. When it comes to actual guest codes, we do it for you automatically to avoid any errors. But that's good to know. I mean, ultimately, they could always go back into the device. I think I have a client who does that and who sets it as the 4 last digits of the phone number for ease of use.
So I mean, this was actually a thought starter that caused us to go down the QR code route. And the
Okay.
reason was that we got a lot of feedback of this phone number thing, but the root cause is not that the phone number is so important; it's remembering the PIN code, right?
Yeah.
So we threw it to the product team. We're like, how do we allow someone who doesn't have access to our app, who doesn't have even a Bluetooth smartphone, just a phone with a screen? How can we allow them to enter and exit without having to remember anything? And that's kind of where we came up with the Algo Pass. So it's really solving the same problem where people can't remember PIN codes.
Yeah.
So I would say that solution later this year, we'll have a little more content about it. But the good thing is it will be compatible with every smart lock we've ever made.
That's awesome.
So you'll be able to get facial recognition or QR code access completely offline to any of our smart locks later this year.
That makes sense. And we have another technical question from Kevin here. Are there any advantages to a single cylinder smart lock instead of a separate deadbolt and latch?
Okay. I think the number one advantage is not so much on the locking, but more when you're opening and closing. With a single cylinder like swing handle or knob type, the user only needs one interaction to open and close the door. The second thing, which is really the battery. So a latch-based smart lock doesn't actually have a motor that drives the bolt. It has a solenoid that disengages the latch. So there's a little less power required to do that. And as a result, you get a little more battery life, but it's nowhere near as secure as a deadbolt. Yeah.
Interesting. So now it's security versus convenience.
Yeah. So I mean, like a latch, I mean, I'm sure you can just kick it in with your foot, no problem. We've seen people kicking deadbolts, but it's not the deadbolt that breaks, it's the door frame.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But with a latch, your latch is gonna blow out.
So is your suggestion for Kevin to buy it and then test it, see which one he can break down? No, I'm joking.
Well,
Don't do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can tell you in the past we did have a swing handle latch type cylinder lock, but it just wasn't as successful as our deadbolt. And even if you just look at the market size, the deadbolt is by far a much bigger lock that people use. On top of that, I know like in Texas and some other states, there are requirements on the type of bolts. Like even in Texas, I know if you have a deadbolt, you need to have a privacy latch above it as well. So even if, the deadbolt, someone has a key, they're able to open it, you still have a privacy latch. So there are requirements as well as to what you can and cannot have.
That makes sense. Awesome. Well, Kevin, you're going to have to check maybe to see which requirements you have to meet potentially with the units that you're managing. Do we have any?
But Kevin, battery life by far would be the biggest difference. But I think there's definitely a trade-off in security.
Yeah. That's the constant balance of what's going to be more convenient, what's going to be easy to use for the guest, what's going to be, not too expensive for the operator, and finding that sweet middle ground between all of it. What's the, I guess, question for me for operators who are here? What are we looking at price range on Igloo locks? What's the range here?
So in the U.S., we have them from at about, I think, $129 to $149, depending on the different platforms.
Amazing.
Like I'll give you an example. Amazon, for example, the pricing fluctuates slightly because of resellers and things, but it's within that range, above $100, below $150, right?
Okay.
Later in the year, we are releasing a new deadbolt, which is kind of a little more competitively priced, ideally at a sub $100 level. So we're really thinking of this at like when you need to scale up $100 lock versus $150 lock with very similar functionality, could be the difference.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I hope everyone here on this call has the ingredients to make the right decision when choosing a smart lock. Obviously, the right brands as well, such as Igloo, a brand that we've been working with now for quite some time. So it's good to finally meet in person, Sid, or meet virtually. And I think, everyone has the right tools now to think through what are the devices that they need. I think we can all agree to the benefits of smart home devices and smart locks for your vacation rental business. I mean, after all, if Airbnb's made the move, then I'm sure it's only a matter of time before the OTAs do too. Any last questions before we finish off this meeting and this webinar? Let's see, we've got Kevin typing here. And then we have another one. We'll wait just a few minutes and then we'll we'll cut things off. But Sid, really appreciate you being on this this webinar with us today. If anyone has any questions around the devices, around the types of devices, what's the easiest way to reach out to Igloo? Oh, and then actually, before we answer that, we've got a cool question. Can biometric be used for evidence of entry as opposed to camera?
As evidence of entry, I suppose it could be used for evidence of unlocking. And I think with a biometric, it's 100% that user and not, let's say, someone else using a PIN code. So I agree it can be used as evidence of unlocking. Entry is a bit tricky because that means someone actually needs to cross the entryway and close the door. So they could unlock it and leave, right?
Yeah, that's true. The thing I would add to this, Kevin, is looking at guest verification as part of your process for your check-in, being able to collect IDs, being able to collect data about your guests. And you know, there's different tools that are out there. We've got software like AutoHost, you've got software like SuperHog, things that we integrate with, and we can provide you with a report at the end of the day of that person having gone through the verification process, as well as use the check-in system embedded in Enso. So that's something I'm happy to share more offline with you if you want to look into that. So you can prove that a person did stay and reduce any sort of chargebacks and fraud and so on, because I know that can be an issue. 100%. Cool. Well, on that note, we're going to end the webinar here. What's the easiest way, Sid, for people to reach out to Igloo or reach out to you? Who should they reach out to learn more?
So they can reach out to us either through our website. We've got kind of a contact us form. All those get directed to our team, you know, in North America. So depending on whether you're a reseller, distributor, vacation rental host, we'll put you in touch with the right person. LinkedIn, I think, always open, you know, through our company page or through my personal page. No issues there.
Easy. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. For those of you who are expecting this to be in French, we do have a French version of this webinar that's going to be sometime next week, if I'm not mistaken. More details to be shared very soon. And thank you so much again for joining us. We'll stay tuned on the next webinar. Thanks again, Sid. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Francois. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in and being such good listeners.
100%. Awesome. Chat soon. And that's right. Go get your smart lock so you can be more operationally efficient with your business. I think that's the end game, the end result here. Cool. Right. Love it. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.